Hey everybody, it's Lastrom here with another video tutorial highlighting the Decentraland SDK. Today we're going to show you how to utilize an image atlas for your 2D UI images. What this does is combine all of your images into one massive image mosaic or atlas, and then in the SDK code we can cookie cut portions of this mosaic out for each individual UI button or background or area. This will only be considered one texture, and it's a great way to optimize your scene. So let's jump in and take a look. What I have right now is an example scene that I've created, and I'm going to show you the end result of what we're going to accomplish with one image texture. So we're going to click on this box, and we are going to get a pop-up. Now this is comprised of 3 different image areas, but actually one image file. So I've got the background, I've got this yes button, and I've got this no button, but they are all contained in one image. So let's figure out how we can create this. I'll show you what the image atlas actually looks like, and then we can dive into the code quickly and test it out. So let's switch over to the code. And here we have what our image is. Okay, so our image is actually, again, one image, right, comprised of many different images within that massive PNG file. So I have one PNG file in my scene folder, and I'll pull that up for you. And that will be right here. One second, let me find it. Okay, so we're in the image atlas, and you can see here we have one atlas image. So what I did is I took this background image from Decentraland's Twitter, and I created 2 little button images, and I put them into one PNG file. The PNG file is, as you can see here in my little amazing display, is 1000 by 800 pixels. And so with an image atlas, if you can think about it, is we have this massive image comprised of multiple images, right? The mosaic or the atlas. And so what we want to do is cookie cut these regions out for different buttons. And so we do that in the SDK code, and it's really nice. And it involves some math, so I'm going to try to be as slow as possible. Once you get it, you're going to be like, aha, and this is going to be amazing. So when you work with images, you always start in the top left corner, okay? And that is 0, 0 in terms of X and Y, okay? And in math, X always goes to the east and west, left and right, and Y always goes up and down, right? When we were taught, Y goes up positive and Y goes down negative. With image atlases, Y going down is actually positive, okay? So what we want to do is we're going to create cookie cutters the size of each region, and that's how we get to display our code or our image in our code. So you can see here this big background splash, it looks to be 1000 pixels wide, and I did the math for you over here, 563 pixels tall. Now you'll see each button is 50 pixels in height and 200 pixels in width. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cookie cut 200 by 50, 200 by 50, and 1000 by 563. And we're going to do all of that in the code right now. So as you can see, we have our example scene, and I'll switch back to our thing here. So here's our example scene, right? We need to go back and we need to delete all of this, okay? And our box is gone. And so now let's get into the coding of the scene so we can add our UI. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a canvas object, okay? UI canvas right here. That's going to let us draw or display 2D objects. We're then going to create an atlas. And this is going to be a new texture. And this texture is going to point to our atlas PNG file. So there's our one texture. And then we need to define some buttons. So let's actually define a rectangle container. So UI container. And we'll give it the canvas. And then for this UI container, we're going to do width equals 100%. And UI container height equals 100%. And let's make this container visible false, because we don't want it to show up until we click a box. So let's click a box. Let's add a box so we can click it. All right, entity, we're going to add a component. It's going to be new box shape. And I'm typing this fast as it's auto-completing. Transform. So what we do is we create an entity, we add a few components to it, and then we add it to the engine. And so let me save this, and let's go to our code, and there we have our box, right? So back in our code, you can see we've defined a box, we've defined a component for that box and added it as a box shape. Let me zoom in on my code here. And we've given it transform, and we've added that box to the engine. Now let's add a on pointer down so we can detect when somebody clicks on the box. And let's do our UI container.visible equals true. Let's go back to our code. And I'm going to walk up to the box. Now you see I can click it. When I click on it, nothing obviously happens because our UI box is invisible at this point. So let's add a background to our container, right? Let's add our first UI image. Okay, so let's go bg equals new UI image. And we're going to parent it to this container object that we've created. And for our source, we're going to use this atlas image. And we're going to continually refer back to our atlas image here for every button and background, because that's where we're going to be cookie cutting from. And so now what we need to do is cookie cut. So we're going to define the size of our cookie cutter. And if you remember, we need to go 1000 width by 563 in size. Okay, that's our cookie cutter size. So how do we do that? We define our source height is going to be what? 563. And our source width is going to be 1000. So now we've defined the size of the cookie cutter. Now we have to tell the cookie cutter where to start cutting. And if you remember when I first started, this is 0, 0, 0 to 1000 to the right, and y going down is positive in this. So we want to start from 0, 0 and cookie cut all the way down like this. And that's how we've defined this. So we're going to start bg source left 0, right? We're going to start in the top left, and source top 0. Let's see what happens. Let's get back to our scene. When I click on this, we get a little image. Look at that. Perfect. How about that? Pretty funny, right? A little small. So let's go back to our code, and now we can actually give the 2D UI image some width and height, right? And so this, what you can always do here is do the math of width divided by height. So if I do width divided by height, 1000 divided by 563, I'll get 1.77. Okay, so now I know if I want my height to be 400, my width has to be 1.77 times 400, which will be 710. Now let's go back to our scene. And when I click on this, our image is now bigger. Pretty cool, right? So we've got our image coming in from the background from this image atlas, okay? And we've cookie cut a section of that. So now we've got to add in the buttons. So let's go back to our code, and now let's define some buttons. And so what I'm going to do is just, in the interest of time, I'm going to copy and paste and change this variable to yes. We're going to go down and do this. So now I have a yes image referring to the same parent container, and again referring to the same image atlas because we want a cookie cut from the same thing. Now we have to redefine our cookie cutter, right? We're no longer cookie cutting 1000 by 563 for each button. We need to cookie cut 50 by 200, right? Because that's the size of each button. So let's change our cookie cutter. Perfect. So now we've defined the size of our cookie cutter. We have to tell the cookie cutter where to start cutting from this image. Again, X is 0 because we're down here on the X axis at 0. However, we are now further down on the Y. We are actually at 564, right? Because there's 563 pixels for this image. So we need to start at 564 for the top left of the Y button, the yes button. So our left is 0. Our top is going to be 564. We should probably change our height. Again, let's just make it equal to our cookie cutter. Let's go back to our code. Check out our scene. Now when I click on this, I'm going to get a really big yes button. See that? Pretty cool, right? Now we can resize our yes button maybe to be half the size. Okay, so let's check that out in the scene. And now look, there's our yes button. So let's go back to our code. Maybe we move the yes button over a little bit. Let's move it to the left. And now our yes button is moved over to the left. So now we've got two images of the UI, 2D UI, but they're coming from the same image texture. This is super optimized. So let's add the last image button and we'll be finished with this tutorial. You guys can be on your way creating some really cool UI pop-ups and displays. Again, just copying and pasting for the interest of time. I'm defining another UI image, a variable called no. We're parenting it to the UI container that we've created. And we are also, again, using the atlas, the same image atlas for our image across all three UI images. The background, the yes, and the no. So if we go back to our image, we notice that the no button is also 200 by 50. So that's pretty cool. We don't have to change our cookie cutter size, right? By source height and source width. That's our cookie cutter of how big we want to cut out from the image. One thing here now is we are still down on the Y at 564. However, we now have to go to the right 201 pixels because that's where the no button is situated. If the no button was down here in our massive image, I would keep the X 0 and I would move down an additional 50. But here we have our no button is over. So we now need to move the left position, and let's move it 201. We should probably change this position for the no button to be to the right 75. So now let's go back, check out our code in our scene. Our button, we click on it, and boom. You notice our no button looks a little chopped off right there. So let's go back to our code and we can make this 200, right? Save that. Let's go back to our scene. And now we have our two buttons. So as a recap for this video, and I wanted to keep it at 15 minutes, we're coming up on that 15-minute marker. What we did is we took an image that was one massive image file comprised of 3 different smaller images. And what we did was cookie cut them out in the SDK based on their position in this massive image atlas mosaic. So we have a big image that's 1000 by 800. The top 0 to 1000 width and 0 to 563 pixels are this main background image. Then we have a 50 by 200 area for the yes button and a 50 by 200 area of the no button. We're able to, in the SDK, define what area of that massive image we want to cookie cut for our specific UI image. So we define the areas that we want to cut from that main image, and then we can position them in world and get a really nice 2D UI image with one image texture. So that's all for this tutorial. Again, replay this if you need to, if it was a little too fast. We're going to be doing a lot more of these videos, so happy to help, and good luck programming.